Police home in on a phone signal. Will they be in time to save a missing couple?
This shipping container had several padlocks, chains, really bolted shut this place. So they spent a long time cutting through all this metal to actually get into the container.
They can hear someone inside. Is it a woman who's been missing for 2 months?
What's causing the banging? So you're there on that farm to look for a body and to hear that banging. Oh my God, are we going to find Kayla or Charlie alive?
Just a girl, just a girl. How are you, honey? This is bolt cutters.
As they free her, they want to know where her boyfriend is.
The gentleman on the line said, Mr. Carver, we found Kayla. And my first question to him was, where's my son? His response was, we haven't found him yet.
The rescue had taken place on the land of a respected real estate agent, Todd Kohlhepp.
You might as well tattoo USA, All-American, all across his forehead. He would look like your all-American, successful, 30-something-year-old man with a good business.
But Todd Kohlhepp was not what he seemed. He'd killed at least 7 times. Who, when, and where?
I was not meaning to hit the mom. I prefer not to shoot women if I can. And I refuse to shoot a kid.
As one of his kidnap and rape victims sat opposite him in court, she, the judge, and the jury were trying to get inside the mind of a serial killer. Like any other day when dealing with clients at his real estate firm, Todd Kohlhepp is trying to be helpful. This conversation, though, is about kidnapping.
I still got a kidnapping charge. It ain't going nowhere.
It's a conversation about rape.
But I had her cuffed, and she wouldn't go anywhere.
And it's a conversation about murder.
So then you shot him how many times?
Shot him twice.
Okay.
In the chest.
Okay.
He dropped forward. When he dropped forward, I went around him and put another one through his spinal column.
Todd Kohlhepp is no ordinary home salesman.
Kohlhepp comes out of the garage, shoots Charlie Carver 3 times in the chest. He drops dead there. He ends up burying Charlie in another shallow grave.
It's a hard thing to accept, that your son is gone.
What made the prisoner sitting opposite cops in Spartanburg, South Carolina, the man he was? Linda Papadopoulos has been seeking the truth about the mind of Todd Kohlhepp. From the start, his is not an encouraging life story.
So Todd Kohlhepp's case is really interesting because what we find is very early in childhood, a certain deviancy.
Todd Kohlhepp, extensive history, a very unique life. He was born in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, before moving to Spartanburg with his mom. And from a very early age, court records show that he had a pretty troubling childhood.
Even as young as in the nursery school age, Todd Kohlhepp was violent. People were afraid of this child.
Some reports will say things like, well, he was very difficult at school. He get into trouble. He had behavioral problems. And that's, I think, something that you hear about a lot of kids. What you don't hear is about young kids being involved in hurting animals, in killing them.
An early favorite pastime of Todd the infant, torturing pets.
There's records indicating that he bleached a goldfish because he wanted a gerbil, meaning like he actually poured Clorox onto a goldfish to torture and kill the goldfish.
Police agencies, detectives need to be keenly aware of the animal crimes that take place around them.
He shot pellet guns at dogs.
Anytime you have a child that is purposely and intentionally hurting an animal, whether it's a dog, a family pet, or a wild animal, anytime you see a child that can torture and maim and derive pleasure from seeing death, it's a huge red flag.
His childhood was far from settled. In fact, he was not, at first, a Kohlhepp.
He was uprooted several times. His mom was married and remarried several times. His birth father divorced his mom at a very young age. And then when she remarried, his stepfather adopted him legally. So that's why he became Todd Kohlhepp. He was born Todd Samsel.
As Todd Kohlhepp, his behavior did not improve.
He punched holes in his walls, he shredded his clothing. Teachers from his early classes in school would report just pretty abnormal behavior.
What's happening here is an emerging picture of a young sociopath.
It's not as if the authorities weren't trying to do something about Todd.
He was sent to a mental institution in the hopes that they could reform him, that they could help him. Why is his brain wired this way? He was eventually released from the mental institution, and he's out. Looks like a normal teenager.
What you don't hear is about young kids being involved in aggressively destroying property that belongs to others and belongs to them. So we know that very early on, Todd Kohlhepp is displaying many of the issues that you would see in a psychopath later on in life.
The worrying child took until he was just 11 before he was hooked on pornographic magazines. By 15, he was enacting his darkest fantasies.
There's a 14-year-old girl, and there's Todd Kohlhepp, 15 years old. His weapon of choice this time is a firearm. He abducts this 14-year-old girl at gunpoint, brings her back to his own house, ties her up with duct tape, wraps that tape around her mouth, and she's helpless, and he sexually assaults her. He threatens her family, he threatens to kill them, and she believes him. She can see the look in his eyes. She has seen what he has done to her. She truly believes Todd is going to kill her family.
The idea that Todd is capable of such a violent act at such a young age, combined with the fact that we know about his other acts before that as a child, is really starting to build up a picture of somebody that not only can't empathize with others' pain, but actually seeks it out and is beginning also to have a complicated relationship with sex and dominance and sex and violence.
It was all there, the red flags as police call them, that Todd Kohlhepp would one day kill. For now, he'd have to wait, because after his conviction for abduction, he was sent away for a long time.
He has to be listed as a sex offender, but he goes, as a 15-year-old child, he goes to the man jail.
Whilst inside, he begins taking courses, equipping himself to be Todd Kohlhepp Mark II.
During that 15 years in prison, he's gotten smart. He is smart enough that he's gone to college. He's obtained knowledge. He has recreated himself. He has performed as a prisoner what society and what prison reformists would think is a model prisoner. And at age 30, he gets released once again into the world.
Once he came back to Spartanburg, he lived a seemingly very normal life. He went to school, got a degree.
He has completely changed who he was, at least on the outside. But that evil, that violent monster was still within.
After getting a job as a graphic designer, Todd is able to indulge two post-prison passions: collecting guns and motorbikes.
He had several BMWs, motorcycles, would brag often about the amount of guns and firearms and ammunition he had been collecting.
2 years after the reformed Todd Kohlhepp was freed, something very bad happened in Spartanburg. Todd Kohlhepp may have appeared rewired for the better since his juvenile days, but he wasn't. He was a killer.
I just remember standing there, and it was a tearful plea to the judge, but I just looked over there at him and wanted him to know what a great person that he took out. Charlie would have gave you the shirt off his back.
As he drove his motorbike along Interstate 85 in South Carolina, Todd Kohlhepp was heading for Chesnee, a town with a motorcycle shop.
On November 6, 2003, that date became known as one of the most notorious homicide cases in Spartanburg County. It all happened at Superbike Motorsports, which was a pretty popular motorcycle dealer and shop there in Chesnee, South Carolina. And at the time, on this date, 4 people were working there. So it was Scott Ponder, who was the owner, Brian Lucas, who was the shop manager, Beverly Guy, who was Scott's mother and also the bookkeeper there, and then Chris Sherbert, who was a mechanic there. So the 4 of them were working there that day, and all 4 were executed, shot and killed right there in the store.
They knew Todd Kohlhepp.
He's a frequent visitor there, often discusses different parts of a motorcycle and different activities, and this was his hobby. He was well known in this shop, and they liked him. However, this one time, Todd went into the shop, and they disrespected him because Todd wasn't as knowledgeable as those workers. See, Todd's persona in his conversations, he tried to portray himself to those workers inside that motorcycle shop as someone he was not. Todd revealed some things that actually stood out, and they called him out on it.
Tell me from the very beginning about Superbikes.
Got there, not everybody was there. Went and sat on a few bikes, did my usual, basically stuck for time, and doing my best to make sure that the paying customers were not there. Collateral damage is not cool.
Sat on a few bikes stalling for time to make sure
Customers were not there. This was during the time, as you know, that it was not busy. I chose time that was not after work, when I would have a lot of people in there. Did not want to shoot other people.
And because they called him out, Todd felt like that small little kid again. He felt angry, and that little demon inside of him that could blow up fish and destroy animals and tear them apart limb by limb came out.
He decided to take his revenge. On the day he arrived, secretly armed, Kohlhepp did not just want to kill, but to wipe out the staff and anyone else who got in the way.
I cleared it in under 30 seconds.
you what now?
I cleared that building in under 30 seconds. You guys would have been proud. I'm sorry, but you guys would have been proud.
All 4 were executed, shot and killed right there in the store.
And in just a matter of seconds, Todd Kohlhepp executed 4 people.
Beverly and Chris were found inside the store. Scott Ponder and Brian Lucas were both found outside the store, just outside the front door in the front parking lot.
Did anybody, as they were falling, did they look at you? Did they face you? Did they say anything to you? Was there any conversation, don't, please, whatever? No, sir. With any of this? I don't remember hearing any of that. I will tell you that once I was engaged.
Okay. So
It's like, at that point, it's almost like a video game. It's not a game, but it's almost like you're focused on, you've been there, sir. You know what I'm talking about.
Suspects, not Todd, were interviewed, but despite a police campaign for information, the case went cold. 9 years would pass before Todd Kohlhepp would make his revelations about what had happened at the motorbike shop at Chesnee.
I'm saying, see, I did not want to shoot.
I didn't want to shoot other customers.
Kohlhepp may have been happy to brag about it when eventually arrested, but in 2003 he remained beyond suspicion. Indeed, he set about the complete rebranding of Todd Mark II. He wanted to become a businessman, buying and selling houses. For that, he needed a license, and he wrote a letter to the South Carolina Real Estate Commission, apparently confessing to some of his early crimes, but decidedly playing down the incident which led him to spend 15 years behind bars.
This letter, I think, is so telling. It's kind of coming clean. Yes, it was a rape, but actually, if you think about it, it's more like a lover's tiff. We got into an argument and things got out of control, and I was a kid. So you begin to see him trying to manipulate perceptions about him. And again, I think he's a master of this.
He was just 15, he said. He'd confronted his girlfriend about two-timing him. They'd gone back to his house rather than shout in the street. Yes, he had a gun, one which he'd never fired. It was his simply because he wanted to defend himself against gangs. The out-of-court plea bargain, which left him on the sex register rather than guilty of rape, that was never mentioned.
This horrible incident that we see back in his childhood, age 15, is something that, people will read the letter where he explained it and think, you know what, he was right. It was a blip, it was, awful that it happened, but look, he's been rehabilitated, he's better. But of course, that's not the case.
But it works. Todd C. Kohlhepp, age 33, had used his powers of manipulation to gain respectability.
It's actually scarily impressive. So what we find is that he sets about reinventing himself. He gets a real estate license. He then becomes interested in flying. He gets a pilot's license. He's a successful member of the community.
And from there, we just see him really digging into his professional life. He eventually opened his own company, TKA Real Estate. He was the lead broker, and he had almost a dozen agents working under him, selling houses for him and everything.
By 2015, Todd Kohlhepp seemed set. The real estate business had been kind to him. He was the go-to guy when it came to buying and selling homes around Spartanburg, Anderson, and Woodruff in South Carolina.
He looked like everyday an American. He looked like that person that you would want to be your neighbor. That's what makes him so scary.
Todd had bought a big house himself and a 100-acre farm. Some of his neighbors found something unnerving about him. He seemed obsessed about guns.
Some neighbors down in Woodruff, where he had that massive property, they would hear gunshots every night. Hundreds of rounds of ammunition. So they were only left wondering, what's going on down there? There must be a lot of target practice if that's the case. He also spent a lot of time down there. So when he wasn't working, he was down there in the evenings at the property, just kind of doing whatever he did down there. So those were a couple of signs where I think in the public eye, you'd start to wonder, what is it about this guy? There's got to be more to him.
Occasionally, Todd Kohlhepp advertised for help. On one occasion, a couple called Johnny Joe Coxie and Megan Lee Coxie turned up for an interview. This might be a nice job to supplement their income.
Many real estate agents or real estate firms, they will hire people to stage a house, get it ready for sale. Or they hire people to clean up existing homes so they can get it ready to sell. Todd advertised for a job for people to come and help him be his cleaners. So this unsuspecting couple went and met Todd at Todd's farm. This was a nice area. It was a lot of land out there.
What was there to be fearful of as they pitched up at Todd's farm? Mr. Kohlhepp seemed such a nice guy.
From a sociological point of view, we have indicators of success, and success makes us feel safe. So if someone has a big house and a good job and a nice car, well, those aren't traits that you typically associate with a psychopathic murderer. Those are traits that make you feel safe. If this person is out there and is saying, well, look, I need someone to come and help me clean the house or help with the gardening, well, clearly they're successful enough. Clearly they have the right interpersonal skills. And I think it's because of this that Todd never really raises any serious alarm bells.
But Todd was still the little boy who would throw a tantrum if anyone got on the wrong side of him, and he was prepared to use extreme violence to sexually dominate and/or kill. The Coxies were in deep trouble.
Kohlhepp had met the Coxies, met Megan Coxie first, and had invited them both to his property.
As they arrived at Todd's farm, something happened.
Todd claimed that Johnny pulled a knife on him.
And that's when Johnny pulled a knife out.
What'd you do with his knife?
Oh no, I don't keep that kind of crap.
You just threw it out?
Yeah, that's right.
Kohlhepp claimed the couple, who had a criminal record, were trying to rip him off.
What did she do when Johnny pulled the knife out? What did she say?
Nothing.
So you think she was planning on the planning of this?
I think she entirely wasn't planning of it.
Okay.
There was no, oh shit,
Yeah.
Johnny, what are you doing? There was none of that. This was, she knew he was doing that.
Mm-hmm.
They saw a guy who had a shitload of money, driving a car they can't afford, and they were going to get something.
And the events that unraveled was a complete nightmare.
So then you shot him how many times?
Shot him twice
Okay.
in the chest.
Okay.
He dropped forward. I went around him and put another one through his spinal column.
Okay, and you shot her.
Not exactly.
Not exactly. He had other plans for Megan.
He shoots and kills Johnny and takes Megan Coxie captive.
He forces her into a locked-up container that he owned.
Tied her up, left her there. While I tried to figure out what to, I didn't know what to do with it, man.
Right.
Got rid of Johnny. Came back, left her there, went and got food, fed the girl.
Fed her after she tried to rob you?
Man, what are you gonna do with her? I don't want to shoot her.
Her husband dead, Megan Coxie at his mercy. Todd Kohlhepp armed, and no stranger to killing. Megan Coxie does not have much to defend herself, as she's locked in a container by Todd Kohlhepp. She does have a lighter.
She tried to light my damn building on fire. Do you know how?
In the back of what building?
The Connex.
He holds her there for about a week. This is near Christmas of 2015.
Mostly just left her the hell alone. I didn't know what to do with her, and then she kept burning shit. I come in and all of a sudden find that she burnt her blanket and she burnt this. She's sitting next to 100,000 rounds of ammo. Love of God, please stop burning shit.
Mm-hmm.
If that thing goes off, do you know what that would do to a neighborhood?
So after a short while, Megan tries to get out, and she puts up a struggle with Todd.
Mistake. Kohlhepp knew only one way to deal with someone putting up a fight. He shot Megan in the head, and it's likely she died instantly.
At that point, he had killed Johnny and Megan Coxie, both of which their bodies were found buried in shallow graves on his property.
The couple were reported missing, but weeks of appeals yielded nothing. Todd Kohlhepp carried on with his business, using Facebook to sell houses, LinkedIn to boast of his success.
While the people that know him face to face, for all intents and purposes, see him as perfectly respectful, his social media site starts to display something that you don't see when you meet him.
If the front behind which Todd Kohlhepp hid the fact that he was still a torturer, a murderer, had worked to allow him to kill and most probably rape again, what was stopping him doing it all over again?
We know that he's already kidnapped and killed one couple, Johnny and Megan. And he's done this by putting out an ad and saying, look, I need someone to come and help me take care of the house. I need a cleaner, I need someone out in the garden. And he does this, gets away with it, so he decides to do it again. And Carla Brown and Charlie Carver respond to the ad in the paper. And that's what the beginning of the end is for Todd Kohlhepp.
It was the beginning of the end for a young man called Charlie Carver.
Charlie was a good kid growing up. Wanted to go out, make an honest living, honest day's pay.
One weekend, Charlie met a young lady. The relationship blossomed. Her name was Kayla Brown.
Charlie and Kayla, they met through Kayla's mom, became friends, and just kind of stayed friends, for a year or so. And Kayla was, there, and they were basically just friends. And then eventually, I guess it led to them dating.
On a hot summer's weekend afternoon, Charlie brought Kayla back to meet his dad.
I really didn't meet Kayla until the Saturday before they went missing on August the 31st. That was the first time I met Kayla. And when I talked to Charlie's mom, I'd asked her how long had they been going out, and she said she had only met Kayla once. So, we got to talking, and, they'd probably only been dating just a couple of months.
Missing. The couple had gone missing. Nobody saw or heard from the couple for 5 days. What had happened to them?
Texted him, called him for days. And then on that Sunday, his mom went ahead and filed a police report and reported him missing.
And Charlie's own mother filed a missing persons report. And in that report and in the conversation, it was known that they were going to meet somebody about a job.
They'd set off for the job on August 31st.
Kohlhepp asked Kayla and her boyfriend Charlie to come to the property in Woodruff to help clean. This was primarily to help him clean up the land there outside. He wanted them to make some paths for him and clean up some pathways for him.
On arrival, Kohlhepp set about his work.
Unfortunately for Charlie, he was killed probably in those first few hours.
The way that Todd operates really gives some insight into how au fait he was with control and manipulation. The first thing he does after kidnapping these couples is to shoot, well, the strongest party, right, is to shoot the other man. And I think this accomplishes two things. I think on the one hand, he has less of a challenge there, someone who he doesn't outweigh by 50 pounds and doesn't, outrank by, 5 or 6 inches. But the other thing that it does is he ensures that he tells the women he's not playing around. So they better feel intimidated, they better feel scared, and most importantly, they better not challenge him.
Kayla is at his mercy. As he had with Megan, he throws her into his container. Somewhere nearby, her phone is left discarded. It becomes vital in what's to happen next.
Kayla had a cell phone. As a detective, one of the first things you would do in this kind of case is order the cell phone records. Now, one would think that you would be able to declare an emergency. There were really no signs that an emergency was happening at this point, so you're having to rely on court orders, warrants, or subpoenas. Telephone companies can take as much as 6 to 8 weeks before you get those records back.
In the 9 weeks which followed the disappearance of Kayla, all hell would be brought to her life. Kohlhepp buried Charlie's body, showed Kayla where, the better to control her. Meanwhile, the police and the families of the couple were desperately searching for them.
For at least the first 30 days, we would just cover roads, rural roads, looking for a car that was wrecked off the side of the road, park on the road, go down an embankment, do anything that looked out of place. Our car could be hid up under, if it went underneath brush or whatever. Charlie's mom and her husband, they did the same thing that we were doing. So we cover more roads around the county. Because, at that time, that's what we thought had happened.
They were not to know that Charlie was dead, or the chilling ordeal that Kayla was being put through. She'd been chained in his container, forced to become the sex slave of Todd Kohlhepp.
There were some things inside that shipping container, little bed area, boxes, some things for storage, a lot of ammunition and firearms, but he chains her up in there.
When you look at the way that he acted, it's truly chilling. Every day, he would go home around the same time, around 4 o'clock, take out Kayla Brown from the container, take her into the house, rape her, then put her back and go on with his day, and repeat the same thing over and over again. So there's a ritualism around it.
Todd used fear with Kayla, not only physical torture, but mental torture, describing how he was good good at taking life, good at killing people. That would keep the fear factor. Can you imagine being chained up and the person holding you hostage is telling you how much they enjoy killing and how good they are at killing people?
There's probably this almost obsessive element around it, right? So kind of this comfort in scratching this itch, this comfort in having this release. Indeed, there must have been a serious high gotten, not just of the sexual gratification, but of the ability to impose your will, to subjugate somebody to that extent. And if we think back to those early days when he was just a child and acting on animals the way that he was acting on human beings, you can see almost how this escalated.
After some weeks, the phone company was able to supply detectives with the data from Kayla's phone.
Using Kayla's phone number, the detectives are able to what's called pinging, look at the cell phone towers. And it basically is a triangulation. And they know that somewhere within a 3-mile radius of the last cell phone tower that Kayla's phone hit will be Kayla's phone. And so they start the search. And where they start is the closest area near this cell phone tower.
And it narrowed their search down to that area in Woodruff where Kohlhepp had purchased and was developing that 96-acre property. Quickly, they traced the property back to the owner, who was Kohlhepp at the time. So that leads us to November 3rd, 2016. On this day, there's a team of law enforcement officers who go to the property in Woodruff where Kayla Brown was being held captive.
Kayla had no idea anyone was searching for her. She could simply hope and pray. Kohlhepp had murdered her boyfriend in front of her, showed her where he was buried, and then where he had buried Johnny and Megan Coxie. Kayla expected to be killed, not rescued. Detectives expected the same fate. They arrived at the site where the phone ping had led them, Todd Kohlhepp's farm.
I would expect to find a dead body, because my training has told me on typical abductions and kidnappings, if you don't find them in the first 48 to 72 hours, the more time that goes on, the higher probability that they're dead. And in any case, most abductions, people are killed in the first 6 hours if it's going to be an abduction where a death is going to occur. So my heart would be racing.
What would detectives find inside the container on the farm of Todd Kohlhepp? This is the moment Kayla Brown was rescued. Detectives' hopes were raised as they battled to get inside because of what was not there.
So as those doors are ripped open, what would stand out? No smell. It's a farm, a small shed with no smell, and you have the banging. What's causing the banging? So when you're thinking you're there on that farm to find a body, to hear that banging, oh my God, are we going to find Kayla or Charlie alive?
Just a girl. Just a girl, just a girl. How are you, honey? This is bolt cutters. This is our best. He's a paramedic, sweetheart. Oh, yeah. Okay, we're going to get you out of there, okay?
Kayla is indeed alive. She has a chain, like a dog chain, a thick chain wrapped around her neck. She can't really move too long. And the detectives and the police are able to rescue her. What is discovered shortly thereafter, unfortunately, Charlie was murdered.
Do you know where your buddy is?
Charlie?
Yes.
He shot him.
He shot him?
Who
did? Douche.
Todd Kohlhepp shot Charlie Carver 3 times in the chest, wrapped him in a blue tarp, put him in the bucket of the tractor, locked me down here, and I never seen him again.
Charlie was murdered that very first day. You see, Todd didn't need Charlie. He wanted Kayla. He made Kayla her chained up sex slave. He did to Kayla anything and everything that he wanted to do. He gained pleasure from torturing her as well as doing other horrible, horrendous acts that one can't even think of.
We're gonna step you out, sweet.
Charlie Carver had been shot almost immediately he arrived at the property. A detective called his father.
The gentleman on the line told me, he said, Mr. Carver, we need to talk. We found Kayla. And I just remember thinking, wow. You know, I mean, because at that point, my first question to him was, where's my son? And his response was, we haven't found him yet.
Kayla led police to a shallow grave, that of Charlie Carver.
Just didn't seem real. The whole conversation, you're thinking, no, it can't be. You get to that point, you're denying it, you know. You got to show me, you got to prove to me that you know without a doubt that it's him, you know. And they were going off of a couple of tattoos that he had and things of that nature. That's how they identified him. It's a hard thing to accept that your son is gone.
Based on the information,
Todd Kohlhepp was not on the farm. Detectives notify a second team that had tracked down where he might be, at his home.
After they find Kayla, they alert the other team that is with Kohlhepp in his house, questioning him about Kayla's disappearance and their connection with him hiring her to help with the houses. At that point, they communicate with each other saying, we found Kayla, and the investigators with Kohlhepp ultimately arrest him there.
We have Kayla. Excuse me? We have Kayla in your property. She was locked in a container, okay? She has told us that you shot and killed Charlie. Then go ahead and put him in the back of your car. Sir.
His arrest had put an end to the killing, but the grieving for victims' relatives was only just beginning.
We went into the bond hearing, you know, they sat us down, told us don't make eye contact. You can't say anything, you can't do anything. They walk him in, and the only thing between me and him was a row of chairs. And I'm thinking, what can I do, or how quick can I jump over this row of chairs, and how long before they pull me off of him? You know, that was my first initial reaction.
Kohlhepp is confronted by detectives in an interview room. For hours, he'd refused to talk, but suddenly he changed his mind and reveals where other bodies are buried, those of Johnny and Megan Coxie.
Todd leads the detectives right then to another couple that came onto his property seeking a job that Todd had reached out to, and he did the exact same with them. The man was discarded quickly. The woman was kept around until eventually she wasn't needed anymore.
I told her I wasn't going to touch her, wasn't going to rape her, wasn't going to do her. Just calm the hell down and let me sort this shit out.
But more astounding revelations were still to come.
Eventually, he sits down with investigators and confesses to being the shooter responsible for that quadruple homicide at the motorcycle store in Chesnee.
Todd starts telling them about the bike shop, that he's the one responsible for the slayings of the 4 people. As a detective, that would be one of your life bonuses in a career. Probably the detectives were shocked, blown away that Todd would admit and confess to that crime, which is so different than the crimes that took place on his property. So what kind of person were we dealing with?
He had not even been a suspect in the Chesnee slaughter.
So now he's looking at 7 bodies to his name.
It's under interrogation that Todd Kohlhepp confesses. He confesses to the murder of Johnny and Megan Coxie. He confesses to the murder of Charlie Carver. And he confesses to something nobody even linked him with in any way, which was the quadruple homicide committed years earlier.
At that time, all 3, manager, owner, and the mom, they were in the back and were coming this way to figure out what had happened.
Why the confession? He is showing who's in charge, dominating.
he's caught, and he wants you to know that he was much better at this, that he duped you for years, that he was able to kill not one person, but he's responsible for the murder of 7 people.
Todd is confessing to crimes because he's getting a thrill at watching the detectives learn from him. He wants to show that he's good at something. He's the expert at killing, and he got away with it. And the cops are inquiring why, how, and they become the students. And Todd gets that thrill out of teaching and educating the cops just how he got away with the crimes he got away with.
All of a sudden I had 3 people in front of me. I dropped the nearest. Mom was the closest, and I shot her 2 to 3 times in the chest.
He wants the police to know this. And I think the reason he wants them to know this is because this feeds into the true thing that he values about his identity. And I think that's being able to manipulate and hide and conceal and to be better at that than your average sociopath.
Did a tactical reload and dropped the other one. That was a very fast reload.
Todd Kohlhepp's childhood was pockmarked with instability and littered with wrongdoing, but the man he became was stable enough to rebuild his life whilst in prison, taking a degree. He went 12 years without committing a crime, evidence that he knew right from wrong, and enough for Charles Carver never to forgive him for taking away his son.
Charlie would have gave you the shirt off his back. He would have gave you his last few dollars, whatever he had, if you needed it. And for him to take him out the way he did was terrible. There's right and wrong, and everybody knows what's right and everybody knows what's wrong. You choose to do what you do.
Kohlhepp pleaded guilty to the murders that he had boasted of. His confession and cooperation with the police became part of a plea bargain. There would be no death sentence. He was given in 2017 7 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. In 2018, Kayla Brown initiated proceedings against him in a civil court, bringing the couple together in the same room for the first time since Kayla had been chained and tortured by him. She and others are seeking damages from Kohlhepp.